Yesterday we talked about propositional tyranny. We're going to talk about other types of mind viruses. Well, first of all, I'd like to apologize for the lack of titles. I updated my phone and now it doesn't work. Oh, imagine that. Whatever. But I would like to say first that if you think that I'm telling anyone that what they are experiencing is not real, that is not what I'm getting at. That's not what I'm getting at with propositional tyranny or with anything else. I think that I illustrated very clearly that people are getting harassed and that they are experiencing group harassment, gangstalking, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of times, it goes into the brain, and people do. They become affected by the harassment, and they become traumatized. So we're going to deal with, something else today, though, because I think one of the phenomena that is very puzzling, not only for targeted individuals, but for everyone else, is, how the stimuli is different for different groups of people, right? Because, for example, targeted individuals, they deal with all this weird harassment, right? People saying things to them, they're getting attacked, they're getting break-ins, they're getting harassed, their property is being assaulted, all kinds of weird things that they're dealing with. But that doesn't happen to everybody. Okay. Why? What's going on there? Okay. What is this change up for different groups of people? Because I think that's one of the puzzling factors that comes into play when you're analyzing all this stuff. And it goes into every area of, of group dynamics and of life itself. With religion, for example, that's one of the strange phenomena that people get confused by. You have all these different manifestations in one group of people, and the other group of people, they don't have it there. And supposedly they're worshiping the same God, right? And all the different denominations and so forth confuse people. Right. Well, that doesn't mean that it's not legitimate. That just means that there's a lot of other things going on. And when you're dealing with a broad subject like religion, I probably should have picked something else. You're dealing with a lot of factors, but you are dealing with deception. Okay. And that's important to know, because when it comes to people being harassed, trying to explain that to a group of people that don't know anything about it, you've got a pretty big wall between those two groups of people. Okay, they're isolated in their circumstances. The stimuli that they're experiencing is completely different, and it creates a division. Okay, much like denominational division. And so when the targeted individual tries to get help, their credibility goes down when they start to talk about this stuff, because it doesn't seem to make logical sense. Okay. And people are going to look at the individual as though they are, suffering from some type of mental disorder. And a lot of times, the trauma causes that stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is, it's just something that is hidden. Okay, it becomes even more obscured and obfuscated by the fact that all these other people have never experienced it, right? And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the different types of propositional tyranny, because targeted individuals, well, they've got one set of circumstances to deal with, and other people don't. Okay, does that mean that they're living in some type of different reality? No. No, it doesn't. It just means that, something, we're going to get into that, has applied different sets of stimuli and circumstances to different groups of people. And that goes into the spiritual explanation. Okay. And there's people out there that are going to say, well, yeah, well, it's all just, government, and some people are selected to be experiments. I think that can happen. I absolutely believe that can happen. Okay. But it's the same dynamic. Okay. Because if you believe, for example, that you are, someone who's in the MK Ultra program, an extended version of it or whatever, well, other people around you aren't, are they? So they're experiencing things differently than you. And I look at it a little bit deeper, to the point where you get into the spiritual arena and you are dealing with entities, principalities, and powers that have blinded the whole world. And I've talked about that before, that if you're dealing with, something like the government or a secret society or a group of people that, has a large, number of people in it, you're dealing with a network. And that network can come after you. Like in the example of the Lutheran Synod, a network was created, where they could use group harassment to kind of critique people and blackball them and do all kinds of things. And when they tried to get help, people just thought they were crazy. They discredited them. It was a covert way of destroying someone. But a network is needed. And in the case of the spiritual dimension, okay, hypothetically, if you don't believe that there, are angels, demons, principalities, and powers, just, humor me, okay? Just use it as a hypothetical scenario and assume that that's true. Well, the network is worldwide, literally. And so it explains how those higher forms of harassment take place, where targeted individuals are leaving a geographical area and they get somewhere else, and they're still dealing with it because the puppets are being used, and that network, the fingers behind what is happening, is able to manipulate people wherever they go, right? Because if we'll just say you were dealing with, the government or something like that, and you left like Snowden and you went to Russia or whatever, well, it should disappear. You should be able to get out of the United States or out of the arena of where the government can get to you, or where their network doesn't exist, and escape it. But there's people that have run into those problems. You should be able to go up into an Alaskan community where there's a bunch of, Eskimos or something. And, there's no feasible way that, you can say that these people are working for the government. But you know what? People have done that. They've gone to isolated communities. They've left their geographical location, and they're still dealing with it. Okay, and to assume that all these people are working for the government, well, that's almost just as ridiculous as anything else. But getting back to the point, you have to have a network to do these things. And in order to keep people, for example, using that hypothetical scenario, or in the case, I believe it. I believe in what the Bible teaches, and I believe there's principalities and powers, and I believe that the kingdom of darkness has basically the world under its control. They have different people and different groups, in that type of propositional tyranny. There's some people that they don't get that type of stimuli, and they assume other things. Okay, they're on their own little yellow brick road. But when it comes to blinding people to things, you have to see the motive. So, for example, when it comes to people who exhibit symptoms, of possible demonic possession, well, now that's been written off in areas of mental illness. Oh no, they're just suffering from a mental disease. So now the whole spiritual dimension has become obfuscated, and they hide behind that. Okay, so when you're dealing with different groups of people that experience different types of stimuli, that's why. In my opinion, that's what you're dealing with. So you have, the decision to do that to targeted individuals. And it's a way to critique them, to harass them, to discredit them, to use them for whatever reason, as social coercion or whatever, even to blind people in the areas of the reality of the spiritual dimension or other things. Well, we'll just use the government, for example. Why is it that the government, when they do this stuff to people, and they do, why do they discredit them? Same reason, to obfuscate the whole program that they're using. So it works on both levels, right? They want to hide what they're doing because, they want to experiment on someone, but they don't want everyone around them to know what's going on. And so they just make them look nuts, right? Oh, they're not a victim of, some type of, scientific experiment or a program that the government is doing covertly. No, they're just crazy, right? So that's what you're dealing with. And people around you and other people that don't know anything about this stuff, they're under that type of blindness. They have a different lens on, right? So targeted individuals have to deal with the propositional tyranny of some of the illusions and messages that come at them in the midst of their harassment, in the midst of being attacked by all these things. And other people, they have to deal with the disinformation in a different way because they're led to believe that you're crazy. They are led to believe that you're nuts. And now let's get into something else to where we're dealing with people who, would be considered, perps or whatever. People deal with that all the time. They'll say, well, I don't know. I think you're in on it. Because what'll happen is people they'll get frustrated. If they're around someone who is paranoid or having symptoms or talking about things that have to do with conspiracies, you might deal with somebody who gets frustrated. And they'll say, well, that's just crazy. You're nuts. You're wacko, man. Right? And they're looking at you like, you just couldn't be any stranger. Well, you're dealing with that on a couple different levels, but you have to realize even if they believe that you were crazy, there's going to be a level of compassion there due to what they've been indoctrinated with, because people who are mentally ill, they don't have control over the perceptions or misperceptions that they have. Right. So if you're dealing with someone and they are getting agitated with you, or they're in your family or social group or whatever, your workplace, and they are accusing you and they are kind of harassing you, and you might even be trying to explain something to them, and they are very resistant to the point of cruelty. Well, that's going to give you an idea of what you're dealing with. Okay. Do they really believe that you're crazy? Well, they could be someone who knows about this stuff at that point, because that goes into the gaslighting, okay? Because like I said before, when people have different sets of stimuli, you have a division, and you have an opportunity there as well. And you have the indoctrination of psychiatry and other things that may work on some level. But when it comes to the things that have been obfuscated and hidden, like harassment or gangstalking, it doesn't work, because now the criteria that is used to diagnose people with mental illness, it's not effective anymore. It doesn't work. But if someone is clearly being, cruel in their methodology of trying to help you or accuse you in a way where it becomes obvious that you're being gaslighted, well, you can see what's really going on in that scenario. So realizing that people are subjected to different things in different forms of propositional tyranny is important. It's not just targeted individuals. Other people who haven't experienced harassment, are also infected with that type of mind virus. It's just different than targeted individuals. There are a lot of different facets to deception and manipulation. And group harassment is manipulation. It is a way to control someone and destroy them covertly. guys, be good to yourselves. Be safe.